The sun hung low over Dodge City like a dying ember, casting long shadows across the dusty main street. Jack Calloway adjusted his worn hat brim, shielding weathered eyes that had seen too much. At 43, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd learned that survival meant keeping your mouth shut and your gun ready. "Hi, how are you? Sorry to interrupt your story, but what I'm going to ask you is really quick, and it will really help the channel to grow and create new stories. Just click below the video image to subscribe. You'll be doing an act of kindness and encouragement to those who are just starting out. Thank you very much, and continue with your story." The saloon doors swung behind him as he stepped into the fading light. 3 days in Dodge City, 3 days too many. Time to move on, like always. But as Jack untied his horse from the hitching post, a commotion erupted from the blacksmith's shop across the street. "Please, mister, you gotta help me." A boy, no more than 12, burst from the shop's shadows. His face was streaked with tears and soot, his clothes torn. Tommy Ford. Jack had seen him around town, always trailing behind his father at the forge. But where was the man now? "Easy there, son." Jack's voice was gravelly from years of sparse conversation. "What's got you all worked up?" "They took Billy." Tommy's voice cracked. "The bandits! They took my little brother!" Jack's jaw tightened. In his experience, children didn't lie about such things. "Where's your pa?" Fresh tears carved clean lines through the dirt on Tommy's cheeks. Pa's dead, sir. Fever took him last month. It's just me and Billy now, and they—" His voice broke entirely. Before Jack could respond, Sheriff Eli Monroe approached, his badge catching the last rays of sunlight. Monroe was a good man, but Jack could see the weight of impossible choices in his shoulders. "Tommy, you need to get home," Monroe said, his tone gentle but firm. "There's nothing more we can do tonight." "Nothing more?" Jack's voice carried an edge that made both the sheriff and Boy look up. "Boy says his brother's been taken." Monroe's eyes hardened as they met Jack's. "And you are?" "Jack Calloway." He didn't offer his hand. "Been in town 3 days. Heard enough to know you've got bandit trouble." "Clay Ransom's gang," Monroe admitted reluctantly. "They've been hitting ranches outside town for months. But this," he glanced at Tommy, "this is different." "How different?" Monroe hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "They left a note. They want something specific from the town. Not money, information." Jack's instincts, honed by years of reading dangerous situations, began to prickle. "What kind of information?" "The kind that could get good people killed." Monroe's voice dropped. "Tommy, you should—" "No." The boy stepped closer to Jack, desperation making him bold. "You look like a man who knows how to fight. Please, Mr. Calloway. Billy's only 8 years old. He's all I got left." Jack studied the boy's face. He'd seen that look before, in his own reflection years ago when the world had taken everything that mattered. The smart thing would be to mount his horse and ride out. Dodge City's problems weren't his problems, but something in Tommy's eyes reminded him of another child, in another time, when Jack Calloway had been too late to help. "Where did they take him?" Jack asked quietly. Monroe stepped forward. "Now hold on, Calloway. This isn't your fight." "Maybe not." Jack's hand rested casually near his gun. "But I'm making it mine." "Where?" Tommy wiped his nose with his sleeve. "They rode north, toward the old Brennan place, but mister, there's something else, something strange." "What's that, son?" "Before they took Billy, the leader, this man with a scar across his cheek, he asked Billy about our pa, about something pa might have told us before he died." Jack and Monroe exchanged glances. This was more than a simple kidnapping. "What did your pa do? Besides smithing?" Jack asked. "Nothing special, just he used to work for the railroad years back, before we came to Dodge City." The pieces weren't fitting together, but Jack could sense a larger picture forming. "Sheriff, I'll need supplies, and I'll need to know everything about this Clay Ransom." Monroe studied him for a long moment. "You're not just a drifter, are you, Calloway?" Jack's smile was cold as winter wind. "We're all something other than what we appear, Sheriff. Question is whether you want that boy back alive." As if summoned by their conversation, a woman approached from the schoolhouse. Maggie Bryant moved with the measured grace of someone accustomed to controlling rowdy children, but Jack noticed how her eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. School teachers in frontier towns learned to be cautious. "Sheriff Monroe," she said, her voice carrying a slight tremor. "I heard about Billy Ford. Is there anything I can do?" "Miss Bryant," Monroe tipped his hat. "Kind of you to offer, but—" "Actually," Jack interrupted, studying the woman's face, "you might be able to help. You know the children in town. Billy ever mention anything unusual? Anyone asking questions about his family?" Maggie's eyes flickered, just for an instant, but Jack caught it. "No, nothing unusual. Billy's a quiet child, keeps to himself since his father passed." She was lying. Jack was certain of it. But why? "Well then," Jack said, his tone deceptively casual, "I reckon I'll be riding out at first light. Tommy, you stay close to the sheriff tonight." "But I want to come with you," Tommy protested. "Billy's my brother, and that's exactly why you're staying here." Jack's voice brooked no argument. "I work better alone." As the group began to disperse, Maggie Bryant lingered. "Mr. Calloway? A word?" Jack nodded to Monroe and Tommy, then followed the schoolteacher a few steps away. "You don't know this town," she said quietly. "There are complications, things that aren't what they seem." "Such as?" Maggie glanced around nervously. "Clay Ransom isn't just a bandit. He's looking for something specific, something that died with Samuel Ford. Tommy's father? Samuel Ford wasn't just a blacksmith. Before he came to Dodge City, he worked for the railroad. He knew things. Dangerous things." Jack's eyes narrowed. "What kind of things?" "The kind that could destroy this town and everyone in it." Before Jack could press for more details, Maggie hurried away, leaving him standing alone in the gathering darkness. Above, the first stars were appearing, cold and distant, as the truth he was beginning to suspect lay buried beneath Dodge City's dusty streets. Jack looked toward the north, where somewhere in the darkness, an 8-year-old boy waited for rescue. But as he prepared for what lay ahead, one question echoed in his mind. In a town full of secrets, who could he trust? The answer, he suspected, would determine whether Billy Ford lived to see another sunrise. As Jack walked toward the hotel, planning his next move, he didn't notice the figure watching from the shadows of the general store. Someone who had heard every word of his conversation with Maggie Bryant. Someone who would make sure Clay Ransom knew that Jack Calloway was coming. The game, it seemed, was about to change. Dawn broke gray and cold over Dodge City, matching Jack Calloway's mood as he checked his weapons one final time. The Colt .45 at his hip was clean and loaded, the Winchester rifle secured to his saddle. But as he'd learned long ago, the deadliest enemies weren't always the ones you could shoot. Sheriff Monroe approached, leading a saddled horse. "Thought you might need a fresh mount. Your horse looks like it's seen better days." Jack accepted the reins with a nod. "Obliged. What else can you tell me about Ransom?" "Clay Ransom's been operating in Kansas for 2 years. Smart, ruthless, and he's got connections. Word is he used to work for the railroad himself before he turned outlaw." "Same railroad as Samuel Ford?" "That's what worries me." Monroe's expression was grim. "There's something else. Last night after you left, I found this slipped under my office door." He handed Jack a piece of paper. The handwriting was crude but clear. "The drifter dies with the boy if he comes north. Some secrets are worth killing for. C.R." Jack crumpled the note. "Seems I've got his attention. Calloway, maybe you should reconsider. This isn't just about rescuing Billy anymore." It never was. Jack swung into the saddle. "Question is, what was Samuel Ford hiding that's worth killing children for?" Before Monroe could answer, Tommy Ford came running from the direction of the schoolhouse, his face flushed with excitement and fear. "Mr. Calloway, wait!" The boy skidded to a stop beside Jack's horse. "I remembered something about Pa." Jack dismounted, crouching to the boy's level. "What is it, son?" "Before Pa died, he was real sick with the fever. But one night, he woke up and grabbed my arm real tight. He said something about a ledger and the truth about Willow Creek. Then he made me promise to never tell anyone." Jack's blood chilled. Willow Creek. He knew that name, though he'd spent years trying to forget it. "Tommy, Jack said carefully. Did your pa ever mention my name? Jack Calloway? The boy's eyes widened. How did you know? He said if anything ever happened to him, and if a man named Calloway ever came to town, I should tell him about the ledger. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture Jack didn't want to see. Samuel Ford hadn't been just any railroad worker. He'd been at Willow Creek 5 years ago when Jack's life had changed forever. Where's this ledger now? Jack asked. Hidden. Pa made me memorize the hiding place, but made me swear never to go there unless... Tommy's voice trailed off. Unless what? Unless Billy was in danger and you came to help. Jack stood slowly, his mind racing. Samuel Ford had known this day would come, had known that Jack Calloway would eventually arrive in Dodge City. But how? Tommy, I need you to show me where this ledger is hidden. But first, we're going to have a talk with Miss Bryant. They found Maggie at the schoolhouse, preparing for a day of lessons that would never come. When she saw Jack and Tommy approaching, her face went pale. Mr. Calloway, I thought you'd left town by now. Change of plans. Jack's voice was steel. We need to talk about Willow Creek. Maggie's composure cracked. I don't know what you mean. 5 years ago, a railroad camp called Willow Creek was destroyed. Officially, it was a Cheyenne raid. Unofficially, it was something else entirely. You know what I'm talking about, don't you, Miss Bryant? Maggie sank into her chair, her hands trembling. How do you know about Willow Creek? Because I was there. Jack's voice carried the weight of old pain. I was the railroad security chief who was supposed to protect those people. Instead, I watched them die. Tommy looked between the adults, confusion clear on his young face. What's this got to do with Billy? Jack kept his eyes on Maggie. Your father wasn't just a blacksmith, Tommy. He was a railroad accountant at Willow Creek. And Miss Bryant here, she wasn't always a schoolteacher, were you? Maggie's voice was barely a whisper. I was a telegraph operator at Willow Creek, and you both survived because you knew what was really happening there. What was happening? Tommy demanded. Maggie looked at Jack, seeking permission. He nodded grimly. There was no Cheyenne raid, she said. The camp was destroyed by railroad men who were stealing from the company and needed to cover their tracks. They killed everyone who could expose them. Everyone except a few who escaped, Jack added. Samuel Ford, Maggie Bryant, and a handful of others who scattered to the winds. But someone's been tracking down the survivors. Clay Ransom, Maggie whispered. He's not just a bandit. He's a killer, cleaning up loose ends for whoever was behind Willow Creek. And now he's come for the last piece of evidence. Tommy's voice was small. The ledger. Your father kept records of the theft. Names, amounts, dates, evidence that could hang some very powerful men. Jack placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. That's why they took Billy. They need that ledger, and they're betting you'll trade it for your brother's life. But that's good, right? Tommy's eyes were bright with hope. We give them the ledger, they give us Billy back? Jack and Maggie exchanged looks. The boy didn't understand. Men like Clay Ransom didn't leave witnesses. Tommy, Jack said gently, once they have that ledger, they won't need Billy anymore. Or you. Or anyone who knows the truth. The weight of understanding settled on the boy's shoulders. So, what do we do? Before Jack could answer, the sound of approaching horses echoed from the street. Through the schoolhouse window, they could see Sheriff Monroe riding hard toward them, his face grim. Trouble, Jack muttered, moving to the window. Monroe dismounted quickly, his eyes scanning the area before he approached. Calloway, we've got problems. 3 of Ransom's men just rode into town. They're asking questions about you. What kind of questions? The kind that end with bullets. Monroe's hand rested on his gun. They know you're here, and they know you're planning to come after Billy. Jack's mind raced. Ransom was moving faster than expected, which meant the outlaw was either desperate or confident. Neither option was good. There's more, Monroe continued. They left another message. Ransom wants to meet. Tonight, at the old Brennan place. Just you. He says he'll trade Billy for the ledger and your life. He's lying, Maggie said. Even if you give him what he wants, he'll kill you all. Maybe. Jack checked his weapons. But it's the only chance Billy has. You can't go alone, Tommy protested. Let me come with you. I know where the ledger is hidden. Absolutely not. But, Tommy, Jack's voice was firm but kind. I've failed to protect people before. I won't fail again, but I need you to trust me. The boy's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded. Jack turned to Maggie. There's something else, isn't there? Something you haven't told me about Willow Creek. Maggie's face crumpled. The man behind it all. The one who ordered the massacre. He's not just some distant railroad executive. Who is he? He's here, in Dodge City. He's been here all along, watching, waiting for the right moment to finish what he started. Jack felt the familiar chill of approaching danger. Who? Maggie's voice was barely audible. Someone you trust. Someone who's been helping Ransom from the beginning. Before she could say more, the schoolhouse door burst open. Sheriff Monroe stood in the doorway, but his gun was drawn and pointed at Jack. I'm sorry, Calloway, Monroe said, his voice heavy with regret. But some secrets are too dangerous to let live. Jack's hand moved toward his gun, but stopped when he saw the tears in Monroe's eyes. You? Jack's voice was filled with disbelief. I didn't have a choice. They have my daughter. She's been missing for 3 months. Ransom promised to return her if I helped him find the ledger. The betrayal hit Jack like a physical blow. In a town full of secrets, he'd trusted the wrong man. Sheriff, Tommy's voice was steady despite his fear. Billy's just a little boy. I know. Monroe's gun hand trembled. God help me, I know. But Emily's my little girl. Jack slowly raised his hands, his mind calculating distances and angles. Monroe, Ransom's been lying to you. If he's had your daughter for 3 months, she's already... Don't. Monroe's voice cracked. Don't say it. She's alive. She has to be. Even if she is, he won't honor the deal. You know that. Maybe not, but I have to try. Jack saw the desperation in the sheriff's eyes and recognized it. The same desperation that had driven him to make his own terrible choices 5 years ago. All right, Jack said quietly. What does Ransom want? You and the boy. At the Brennan place. Sunset. Jack nodded slowly. Then that's where we'll be. But as Monroe led them from the schoolhouse at gunpoint, Jack caught Tommy's eye and gave the slightest nod toward the back door. The boy was smart. He'd understand. Because Jack Calloway had learned something important at Willow Creek. Sometimes the only way to save innocent lives was to become something you'd sworn never to be again. Tonight, Clay Ransom would discover that some men were more dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. The abandoned Brennan place squatted against the darkening sky like a wounded animal. Jack Calloway sat his horse at the edge of the property, studying the layout with the practiced eye of a man who'd survived more ambushes than he cared to remember. The main house was dark, but smoke drifted from the chimney of the old bunkhouse. They were here. Sheriff Monroe rode beside him, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. Calloway, when this is over, we'll see who's left standing to worry about it. Jack's voice was calm, but his eyes never stopped moving. Your daughter, what's her name? Emily, she's 14. Smart as a whip, stubborn as her mother was. Monroe's voice caught. She wanted to be a teacher, like Miss Bryant. Ransom tell you how he took her? Monroe was quiet for a long moment. Said she was walking home from the mercantile, just vanished. Found her school books scattered in the alley behind the bank. Jack filed that information away. Something about it didn't sit right, but there wasn't time to pursue it now. Where's Tommy? Safe. Locked in the jail cell like you asked. It had been a calculated risk, convincing Monroe to secure Tommy at the jail instead of bringing him to the meeting. Jack had made it sound like protection for the boy, but in truth, he needed Tommy free to retrieve the ledger if things went wrong. Remember, Jack said as they approached the house, whatever happens, don't give up hope about Emily until you see proof. Monroe nodded, though his eyes remained haunted. The front door of the house opened as they dismounted. Clay Ransom stepped onto the porch, and Jack got his first good look at the man who'd been terrorizing the territory. Ransom was younger than expected, maybe 35, with the lean build of a man comfortable with violence. The scar across his left cheek was prominent, but it was his eyes that marked him as dangerous, cold, calculating, and utterly without mercy. Jack Calloway, Ransom called out. "The famous railroad security chief. Heard you were dead." Disappointed? Ransom's laugh was like breaking glass. "Not at all. Makes this more interesting." Two more men emerged from the shadows, hardened outlaws with the look of men who killed for pleasure as much as profit. But it was the fourth figure that made Jack's blood run cold. Billy Ford stumbled out of the house, his small hands bound, his face streaked with tears and dirt. But he was alive, and that was what mattered. "Billy!" Monroe started forward, then caught himself. "Easy, Sheriff," Ransom drawled. "Boy's fine, for now. But that depends on how cooperative Mr. Calloway feels." Jack dismounted slowly, his hands visible but ready. "What do you want, Ransom?" "Same thing I've always wanted. The ledger Samuel Ford kept. The one that lists every name, every transaction, every dirty detail of what happened at Willow Creek. And in exchange? The boy lives. You die quick instead of slow. Sheriff Monroe gets to see his daughter again." Jack's eyes narrowed. "You have Emily Monroe?" "Of course I do. Insurance policy. Amazing how cooperative a lawman becomes when his little girl's life hangs in the balance." Monroe stepped forward, desperation clear in his voice. "Where is she? You promised—" "I promised nothing, Sheriff. I said she'd be returned if you helped me. I never said when, or in how many pieces." The casual cruelty in Ransom's voice made Jack's trigger finger itch, but he forced himself to remain calm. "The ledger's not here. I know. It's hidden somewhere in town. But young Tommy knows where it is, doesn't he?" "Maybe. But Tommy's not here either." Ransom's smile was predatory. "No, but he will be. See, I've got men watching the jail. The moment that boy tries to leave, they'll bring him here, along with whatever he retrieves." Jack felt the trap closing around them. Ransom had thought this through carefully, too carefully for a simple outlaw. "You're not just working for yourself," Jack said. "Who's really behind this?" "Smart man, but not smart enough." Ransom gestured to his men. "Bring them inside. Time for the real conversation." They were herded into the main room of the house, where a fire crackled in the stone fireplace. The furniture was covered with dust sheets, giving the place a ghostly atmosphere. Billy was pushed into a corner, where he huddled with the resigned terror of a child who'd seen too much. "Now then," Ransom said, settling into a chair like a king holding court. "Let's talk about Willow Creek." "Nothing to talk about," Jack replied. "It's ancient history." "Is it? Because from where I sit, it looks like unfinished business." Ransom pulled out a leather portfolio and opened it. "See, I've got my own records. Names of everyone who was at Willow Creek. Most are dead now, of course, but a few survivors scattered to the winds." He pulled out a photograph, a group of railroad workers standing in front of a construction train. Jack recognized it immediately. He was in the picture, younger and more optimistic, standing next to Samuel Ford and Maggie Bryant. "Took me 2 years to track down this photograph," Ransom continued. "Amazing what people will sell when they need money, or when they're afraid." Jack studied the photo more carefully. There, in the background, partially obscured by shadows, was another familiar face. Sheriff Monroe. "You were there too," Jack said quietly. Monroe's face went white. "I was just a deputy then. Temporary assignment, helping with security. And you never mentioned this because? Because I was ashamed." Monroe's voice cracked. "I saw what happened. I knew it wasn't Indians who destroyed that camp. But I was young, scared. I kept my mouth shut and ran." Ransom clapped slowly. "Touching confession, Sheriff, but you left out the best part." "What best part?" Jack demanded. "Tell him, Monroe. Tell him about the gold." The sheriff's shoulders sagged. "There was a payroll shipment, 50,000 in gold coins, meant for the workers. It disappeared the night before the massacre." "Disappeared," Ransom repeated. Such a polite way to put it. The truth is, someone stole it. Someone who knew the camp would be destroyed and all the witnesses killed. Jack felt pieces clicking into place. Someone who's been living off that gold ever since. Very good. And Samuel Ford's ledger doesn't just list the theft from the railroad company, it lists the payroll theft too. Names, dates, everything. "Including the name of who really took the gold," Jack said. "Including that?" "Yes." Ransom's smile was triumphant. Which brings us to our current situation. See, the man who stole that gold has been very generous to me over the years. Generous enough that I'm willing to kill anyone who threatens to expose him. Who is it? Jack demanded. Before Ransom could answer, the sound of approaching horses echoed from outside. Through the window, Jack could see torches moving in the darkness. Ah, Ransom said. Right on schedule. The door opened, and Tommy Ford was pushed inside by one of Ransom's men. The boy's eyes immediately found Billy, and relief flooded his face. Tommy! Billy cried out. I'm here, Billy. It's going to be okay. But Jack could see it wasn't going to be okay. Tommy carried a leather satchel, the ledger, and behind him, framed in the doorway, stood the last person Jack expected to see, Maggie Bryant. Hello, Jack, she said quietly. I'm sorry it had to end this way. The betrayal hit him like a physical blow. You. She's been working for me from the beginning, Ransom said. Amazing how easy it was to convince her. All it took was the right leverage. Jack's mind raced. Emily Monroe. She's not Ransom's prisoner, she's yours. Maggie's face crumpled. Emily is my niece, my sister's daughter. When my sister died, I became her guardian. But I needed money, Jack. Teachers' wages barely keep us fed. So you made a deal with the devil. I made a deal to survive. Maggie's voice rose. Do you know what it's like to watch a child go hungry? To see her wearing the same dress to school every day because you can't afford another? And the gold made it all better? The gold made it possible to give Emily a future, to send her east to a real school, away from this God-forsaken place. Jack looked around the room, at Monroe's devastated face, at the two frightened boys, at Maggie's desperate justification. Where is Emily now? Safe, Maggie said. In Kansas City at a boarding school. She doesn't know anything about this. But Monroe doesn't know that. Monroe was useful, Ransom interjected. Amazing how a man will betray his principles when he thinks his child's life is at stake. Jack turned to Tommy. The ledger? The boy clutched the satchel tighter. I won't give it to them. Not until Billy's safe. Smart boy, Ransom said, but not smart enough. You see, I don't actually need the ledger anymore. What do you mean? Ransom's smile was cold as winter. I mean the man who hired me decided it was easier to eliminate all the witnesses than to keep paying for silence. Starting with everyone in this room, the trap was complete. They'd been lured here not to make a trade, but to be eliminated. All of them. But as Ransom's men reached for their guns, Jack caught Tommy's eye and gave the slightest nod toward the fireplace. The boy was smart. He'd understand what needed to be done, because sometimes the only way to expose the truth was to make sure it survived, even if you didn't. The moment stretched like a held breath before hell broke loose. Jack Calloway had survived this long by reading the subtle signs that preceded violence, the slight tensing of muscles, the shift in breathing, the way a man's eyes focused just before he drew his gun. He saw all of these signs now in Clay Ransom's men. Tommy, Jack said quietly, never taking his eyes off Ransom. Remember what I told you about the fireplace? The boy's grip tightened on the ledger. He understood. Touching last words, Ransom said, rising from his chair. But I'm afraid this conversation is... Tommy Ford moved faster than anyone expected. In one fluid motion, he hurled the leather satchel into the roaring fireplace. The dried pages caught immediately, flames licking hungrily at 5 years of carefully documented evidence. No! Ransom lunged forward, but Jack was already moving. The room exploded into chaos. Jack's Colt cleared leather with practiced speed, his first shot taking down the outlaw nearest to Billy. Sheriff Monroe, despite his betrayal, still had lawman's instincts. His gun was out and firing at Ransom's second man. "Get the boys down!" Jack shouted to Maggie, who stood frozen in the doorway. But Maggie Bryant had made her choice long ago. Instead of protecting the children, she drew a small derringer from her sleeve and aimed it at Jack's back. "Jack!" Tommy's warning cry came just as Maggie pulled the trigger. Jack threw himself sideways. The bullet meant for his heart instead, tearing through his shoulder. He rolled behind an overturned table, blood seeping through his shirt, but his gun hand remained steady. Ransom had managed to pull some of the burning papers from the fire, but they crumbled to ash in his hands. "You stupid boy! Do you know what you've done?" "I know exactly what I've done," Tommy said, his young voice steady despite the chaos around him. "I've made sure the truth dies with us." "Oh, the truth doesn't die that easily," a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see a figure silhouetted against the night sky. As the man stepped into the firelight, Jack's blood ran cold. It was Judge Harrison Blackwood, the territorial judge who'd been visiting Dodge City for the past week. "Judge Blackwood," Monroe said, confusion clear in his voice. "What are you doing here?" "Cleaning up loose ends, Sheriff, just like I've been doing for 5 years. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place for Jack. You were the one behind Willow Creek." Blackwood smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Very good, Mr. Calloway, though it took you long enough to figure it out. You stole the payroll gold. I liberated it from a corrupt system. Do you have any idea how little a territorial judge makes? How many years I spent watching lesser men grow rich while I struggled to maintain the dignity of my position? So you decided to steal it." "I decided to take what I deserved. The railroad was already stealing from the government, skimming funds meant for construction. I simply redirected some of those funds to a more worthy cause." Jack kept his gun trained on Blackwood, but his shoulder was bleeding heavily and his vision was starting to blur. "And when Samuel Ford discovered your theft?" Ford was an idealist. He thought he could expose the corruption and clean up the railroad. He had no idea how deep the rot went or how many powerful men were involved. "So you had the camp destroyed." "I had the camp cleansed. A few dozen workers in exchange for protecting a system that employed thousands? It was a simple calculation." "You're insane," Monroe breathed. "I'm practical," Blackwood corrected. "And I've spent 5 years eliminating anyone who could threaten that practicality. Ford, Bryant, you, Calloway, all loose ends that needed tying up. But Maggie's been working for you," Jack said, trying to buy time while he assessed their situation. 2 of Ransom's men were down, but Ransom himself was still armed and dangerous. Maggie had retreated to a corner, her derringer still in hand. The boys were huddled behind an overturned chair, relatively safe for the moment. "Miss Bryant served her purpose," Blackwood said, "but she's become unreliable. Emotional attachments have a way of complicating business arrangements." Maggie's face went white. "Harrison, you promised Emily would be safe. You promised—" "I promised nothing. The girl is useful leverage, nothing more." "You bastard!" Maggie swung her derringer toward Blackwood, but Ransom was faster. His shot took her in the chest, spinning her around before she collapsed. "Maggie!" Monroe started toward her, but Blackwood's voice stopped him. "Stay where you are, Sheriff. Your usefulness has also come to an end." Jack saw his chance. While Blackwood's attention was on Monroe, he rolled from behind the table and put 2 bullets center mass into Clay Ransom. The outlaw went down hard, his gun clattering across the floor. But the effort cost Jack. His wounded shoulder screamed in protest, and he could feel his strength ebbing with each heartbeat. "Impressive, Mr. Calloway," Blackwood said, his own gun now trained on Jack, "but ultimately futile. You see, I've already arranged for this entire incident to be blamed on Clay Ransom's gang, a tragic shootout that claimed the lives of everyone present, except yours, except mine. I'll arrive just in time to find the carnage, having been summoned by reports of gunfire, a hero judge, too late to save the victims but present to ensure justice is done." Jack's vision was starting to tunnel, but he forced himself to focus. "There's one problem with your plan, Judge." "What's that?" "You're assuming you'll be the only one left alive to tell the story." Before Blackwood could react, Tommy Ford emerged from behind the chair. In his hands was Ransom's fallen gun, and despite his youth, his aim was steady. "Let my brother go," Tommy said, his voice carrying a strength that belied his years. Blackwood laughed. "A child with a gun? How dramatic. But you won't shoot me, boy. You don't have it in you." "Maybe not," Tommy admitted. "But he does." Sheriff Monroe had used the distraction to circle behind Blackwood. His gun was pressed against the judge's neck. "It's over, Blackwood," Monroe said. "Drop the gun." For a moment, it seemed like the nightmare might end. Then Blackwood smiled. "Actually, Sheriff, it's just beginning." The judge's hand moved to his vest pocket, pulling out a small device that Jack recognized with growing horror. A dynamite detonator. "You see, I've taken the liberty of placing charges throughout this building. If I don't make it out alive, neither does anyone else." "You're bluffing," Monroe said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "Am I? Look around, Sheriff. Notice how my men aren't here? They're outside, waiting for my signal. If they don't see me walk out that door in the next 5 minutes, they'll assume I'm dead and detonate the charges anyway." Jack forced himself to his feet, using the wall for support. "Even if that's true, you're still outnumbered, but not outmaneuvered." Blackwood's thumb hovered over the detonator button. "Here's what's going to happen. Sheriff Monroe is going to drop his gun and step away. The children are going to come with me, and Mr. Calloway is going to bleed out quietly in the corner. And if we refuse, then we all die together. Your choice." The silence stretched taut as everyone weighed their options. Then Billy Ford, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, spoke up. "Mr. Judge, are you the bad man who hurt my pa?" Blackwood glanced down at the 8-year-old with annoyance. "Your father was a fool, child. He should have minded his own business. Pa always said bad men think they're smarter than everyone else, but they always make mistakes." "What mistake have I made?" Billy's smile was innocent and devastating. "You forgot about the back door." The rear entrance to the house burst open, and 3 men rushed in, townspeople Jack recognized from Dodge City, led by the blacksmith who had taken over Samuel Ford's shop. "Nobody move!" the blacksmith shouted. "We've got the place surrounded!" Blackwood's composure finally cracked. "Impossible. Your men are tied up behind the barn," the blacksmith said. "Turns out the boy here is smarter than you gave him credit for." Jack looked at Tommy with new respect. "You planned this." Tommy nodded. "When you told me to stay at the jail, I knew you were planning something. So I told Mr. Henderson about everything. About the ledger, about Billy, about Judge Blackwood. We've been following you since you left town." Blackwood's hand tightened on the detonator. "It doesn't matter. I can still—" Sheriff Monroe's gun butt caught him behind the ear, dropping him unconscious to the floor. The detonator skittered away harmlessly. "That's for Emily," Monroe said quietly, "and for making me betray everything I believed in." As the townspeople secured the scene and tended to the wounded, Jack slumped against the wall, finally allowing exhaustion to claim him. Tommy and Billy Ford were reunited, their tears of relief mixing with the smoke and dust of the old house. "Mr. Calloway?" Tommy's voice seemed to come from far away. "Are you okay?" Jack managed a weak smile. "I'll live, son. Question is, what happens now?" "Now we go home," Tommy said simply. "And we remember Pa the way he really was, a good man who tried to do the right thing. And the truth about Willow Creek? The truth doesn't need a ledger," Sheriff Monroe said, kneeling beside Jack to examine his wound. "We've got enough witnesses now to make sure justice is done." As dawn broke over the Kansas prairie, Jack Calloway watched the Ford brothers walk hand in hand toward their uncertain but hopeful future. For the first time in 5 years, the ghosts of Willow Creek were finally at rest. The reckoning had come at last, and for once, the good men had won. Hello, how are you? Did you enjoy the story? Like, share, comment on which city you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel to help us continue adding new amazing videos. Thank you very much, and come back often.